Honey, the service entrance is in the back, with the rest of your people. The words dripped from Kaitlyn Hayes' lips like poison-laced honey. Her eyes never left the phone screen, where a flawless, curated world danced beneath her expertly swiping thumb. She merely jutted her chin toward the service corridor, a gesture as brief as it was dismissive. Her tone suggested she dealt with this type all the time. Eleanor Vance stopped cold. The heel of her Manolo Blahnik clicked once against the Calicut marble floor, a sharp, solitary sound in the cavernous silence of the Sterling Vance Tower lobby. Outside, New York City was unleashing a cold October rain, but that chill was nothing compared to the one seeping in her bones. Her Burberry trench coat, a $5,000 piece she'd bought not to show off, but to reward herself for closing a 9-figure deal, bore a single, perfect raindrop, glittering like a misplaced diamond. She didn't feel anger. The hot flush of rage was a luxury she hadn't been able to afford for a long time. What she felt instead was a profound weariness, a geological exhaustion built from 1,000 tiny moments just like this one. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, inhaling the lobby's signature scent, a subtle blend of Italian leather and cedarwood that she herself had chosen. This wasn't the first time. It certainly wouldn't be the last. But this time was the most painful because it was happening in the place she called home. Eleanor's silence seemed to unnerve Kaitlyn. It challenged her petty dominion. She finally looked up, her eyes sweeping over Eleanor from head to toe. It wasn't a glance. It was an appraisal, a comprehensive assessment designed to categorize and dismiss. The look skimmed over the impeccably tailored Armani suit, paused for a moment on the Patek Philippe watch gleaming under the crystal chandelier, and ultimately concluded it was all a facade, a clumsy performance. To Kaitlyn, a black woman dressed like this, in this place, could only be a fraud. "Hey, are you deaf?" Kaitlyn snapped, the arrogance in her voice sharpening. I heard what you said, Ms. Hayes." Eleanor's voice was soft, yet it cut through the air. It was the first time she had spoken, and the fact that she knew Kaitlyn's name made the receptionist falter for a second. The scene was beginning to draw an audience. Frank Miller, the security guard whose gray uniform seemed to have absorbed the fatigue of his own soul, approached slowly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and motionless. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Let me show you the way." He wasn't a bad man. He was just an obedient one, a cog in a vast machine. Two junior analysts, on their way to lunch, paused at a safe distance. Phones were discreetly raised. It's astonishing how quickly a courtroom can be assembled and a verdict rendered before a single charge has been spoken. And Kaitlyn, sensing she was the center of attention, decided to escalate the drama. A smirk played on her lips as she pulled up Instagram Live. "Oh my God, you guys," she whispered in her phone, her voice theatrically conspiratorial as she angled the camera toward Eleanor. "You are not going to believe what I have to deal with today. Some high-end Karen thinks she can just walk into the executive area like she owns the place." The viewer count began to dance on the screen. 12, 25, 53. A torrent of vicious comments began to flood the feed. "Call the cops. That's a scam artist's face right there. The entitlement is unreal. Sterling Vance security is weak AF, get her out." Eleanor saw the red recording light. She saw her own face reflected on Kaitlyn's screen. And then she did the one thing no one expected. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smile of cold, surgical precision. It wasn't the smile of surrender, but that of a predator who had just spotted her prey. It held no fear. It held only the quiet, terrifying promise of a reckoning to come. Eleanor's smile seemed to be a cue. The revolving glass doors spun again, admitting another woman who brought with her the chill of the rain and an air of middle management authority. It was Cynthia Rowe, the head of human resources. She wore a severe gray suit like a suit of armor, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin of her face. She didn't need to ask what was happening. She only needed to look. Cynthia's gaze flickered over Kaitlyn, who was engrossed in her live stream, then over the hapless Frank Miller, before settling on Eleanor. She appraised Eleanor in 3 seconds, a ruthlessly efficient process honed over 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder. Then, in the tone of someone ordering the disposal of a spill, she spoke to Frank, just loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "Frank, get this done. She doesn't fit the corporate profile. Handle it discreetly before the senior executive arrive." Corporate profile. Such a clean, professional phrase, a sophisticated veil for a much uglier truth. You are not white. Just then, the VIP elevator chimed softly. The polished bronze doors slid open, and Richard Sterling, the VP of Operations, stepped out. He was in his 50s, his salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed, his Zegna suit worth more than Frank's annual salary. He radiated the aura of a man who had never been told no in his life. "What the hell is going on here?" Richard's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of command. Cynthia scurried over to him like a loyal lieutenant. "Richard, thank God you're here. We're handling a situation. This woman refuses to leave." Richard Sterling narrowed his eyes at Eleanor. His contempt was unconcealed. "A situation? I see a trespasser." Eleanor remained still. She offered no defense, no explanation. Instead, she began her chess game with moves of startling simplicity. She looked at Cynthia. "Excuse me, could you state your full name and title for the record, please?" Cynthia froze. "You're in no position to." "And you, sir?" Eleanor shifted her gaze to Richard, her voice still as soft as velvet. "Could you confirm who the majority owner of this building is?" The questions, so basic, sowed a subtle confusion. They weren't direct. They circled the issue, tightening an invisible snare. Richard scoffed. "This is the Sterling Vance Tower. Now get out." During this exchange, Eleanor subtly opened her Hermes briefcase. The corner of a legendary black American Express Centurion card became visible. On her wrist, a limited edition Patek Philippe watch silently marked the seconds of the unfolding drama. But her antagonists were blinded by the glare of their own prejudice. They didn't see symbols of power. They saw expensive accessories on a black woman and assumed them to be fakes, props in a more elaborate scam. Kaitlyn's live stream had now surpassed 2,000 viewers. The hashtag Sterling Vance Karen was beginning to trend on Twitter. The comments grew more venomous. Richard was losing his patience. He was not accustomed to being defied, even by silence. He turned to Frank. "I don't know who she is, and I don't care. You have 10 seconds to leave this property before I have you physically removed." The crowd held its breath. Frank, empowered by his superior's command, took a step forward, his hand reflexively resting on the baton at his hip. The phones were still recording. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The public humiliation, the submission of the outsider. 10 seconds stretched into an eternity. 9, 8. Just as Frank was about to act, a phone rang. Not a jarring ringtone. It was a subtle, classical melody emanating from Eleanor's phone. She calmly brought it to her ear, her eyes still locked on Richard. The entire lobby seemed to hush to listen. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos, crisp and clear. Every word landed in the tense silence like a marble on a glass floor. "Margaret, tell the board I'm handling a personnel matter in my lobby. I'll be up in 5 minutes." My lobby. The two words hung in the air, shattering the tension with a different kind of shockwave, one of profound disbelief. Richard Sterling, the man accustomed to absolute control, stopped cold. His entire confident demeanor, like a glass mask, suddenly developed a hairline crack. What did you just say?" Kaitlyn, still holding her phone, let out a scornful laugh, but sounded brittle, uncertain. Her lobby? Delusions of grandeur much. Eleanor didn't bother to reply. She ended the call and put her phone away, every movement slow, deliberate. She wasn't looking at Richard anymore. She was staring into the middle distance, as if reading from an invisible teleprompter. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, like an AI reciting data. "I know that our Q3 revenue was $950 million, 7% above forecast. I know we have $15.2 billion in client assets under management. And I know that next Tuesday, we have an SEC audit that only 5 people in this building are aware of." Each number was a hammer blow to the lobby silence. Cynthia Rowe, who prided herself on her institutional knowledge, felt the blood drain from her face. That was information of the highest classification, discussed only in the most private meetings on the 40th floor. Richard Sterling took a reflexive step back. How do you know that? His voice had lost its command. It was now laced with bewilderment. Eleanor finally locked her eyes onto his. Her gaze was piercing, cold. The same way I know your name is Richard Sterling, and that you are standing in the Sterling Vance Tower. She deliberately emphasized the name Vance. That name, the second name on the building, the one people often overlooked in the blinding light of the Sterling family legacy. It hung there, the final, horrifying puzzle piece their frantic minds were trying to place. Vance? Eleanor. At that moment, an elderly board member who had just entered the lobby and witnessed the final seconds of the confrontation, squinted at the leather briefcase in Eleanor's hand. He wasn't looking at the brand. He was looking at the two small, gold letters elegantly embossed in the corner. EV. Good Lord, he whispered, his voice trembling. Eleanor Vance. The name was spoken like an incantation, shattering the entire charade. Cynthia Rowe mouthed the name, as if tasting poison. Richard Sterling stared at Eleanor, his face a rapid-fire progression of emotions, from contempt to confusion to dawning recognition, and finally, to pure, unadulterated terror. He had connected the dots. Eleanor, without saying another word, opened her Hermes briefcase. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out something far more terrifying. A document binder. She flipped it open to the first page. It was official letterhead on the finest cream-colored paper stock. Under the crystal lights, the embossed gold lettering gleamed like a final judgment. From the office of the chairwoman and chief executive officer. And beneath it, a single name. Eleanor Vance. In that instant, time seemed to stop. Crash. Kaitlyn's phone slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The live stream blinked out of existence. Richard Sterling staggered, his knees buckling. He had to brace himself against the reception desk to keep from collapsing, his face ashen white. The last comments on Kaitlyn's feed, before it went dark, had shifted from mockery to a collective, digital gasp. OMG. Vance? As in Vance? Oh no, that receptionist is so fired. Get the stream back up. But it was too late. The velvet curtain had fallen, leaving behind the naked truth and a silence that was more damning than any scream. The tribunal was about to begin. The silence in the lobby was thick, so heavy you could cut it with a knife. The only sounds were Cynthia Rowe's ragged breathing and the faint crackle of the shattered phone at the feet of Kaitlyn, who now stood frozen like a statue carved from salt. Eleanor Vance placed the binder back in her briefcase. She didn't need it anymore. Her power wasn't on paper. It was in her very presence. She pulled out her phone and redialed her assistant. Her voice was no longer soft. It was cold as surgical steel, sharp and precise. Margaret, she said, loud enough for everyone within a 20-meter radius to hear, please inform the board that we have a new first agenda item, a live case study on systemic discrimination and a hostile work environment. I'm bringing the subjects of the study with me. She ended the call and turned, facing the people who had condemned her just minutes before. The crowd of employees stood stock still, no one daring to leave, no one daring to speak. They knew they weren't just witnessing a firing. They were witnessing a tectonic shift in the company's balance of power. Eleanor transformed the lobby into her courtroom. She was the prosecutor, judge, and jury. Her eyes landed on Cynthia Rowe first. Ms. Rowe, she said, her voice even. You said I didn't fit the corporate profile. Please, for the benefit of our board and the nearly 3,000 people who were just watching that live stream, define that profile for me. Cynthia stammered, unable to form a coherent word. The trap was sprung. Any answer would be a self-indictment. Eleanor didn't wait. She shifted her target to Kaitlyn, who was trembling like a leaf in a storm. Eleanor bent down and picked up a shard of Kaitlyn's broken phone. Ms. Hayes, your caption said you were dealing with a Karen. You used the phrase, your people. Who are my people, Ms. Hayes? The cleaning crew or the board of directors? Kaitlyn burst into tears, meaningless sobs on a pale, stricken face. Finally, Eleanor faced Richard Sterling. She walked toward him, forcing the tall, imposing man to meet her gaze. "Mr. Sterling, you authorize the use of physical force. Is that standard procedure for greeting this company's majority shareholder? Or is it reserved only for people with my skin color?" The question was a physical blow to his pride. At that moment, Eleanor's assistant, a sharp young woman named Anne, had appeared silently beside the massive information screen in the lobby. She plugged in a flash drive. Instantly, the screen that normally displayed stock market news was now projecting screenshots from Kaitlyn's live stream, trending tweets with the hashtag #SterlingVanceKaren hashtag, and a plunging stock chart. Henderson Pension Fund, which is $400 million entrusted to us, just called, Eleanor announced to the entire lobby, her voice still ice cold. "Their chief diversity officer wants a meeting. Tomorrow morning. Our stock has dropped 3 points in the last 15 minutes. That's $80 million of market cap evaporated. Because of a live stream, the punishment was no longer a threat. It was a reality." "Mr. Miller," Eleanor said, addressing the security guard who was trying to fade into the wallpaper. "You are on administrative leave, effective immediately. Surrender your badge and radio to Anne." Frank Miller did so with trembling hands, unable to look anyone in the eye. "Ms. Hayes," she continued, without a hint of hesitation, "your employment with Sterling Vance is terminated. Security will escort you from the building." Kaitlyn sank to the floor, her sobs now turning into desperate, heaving gasps. "Ms. Rowe, Mr. Sterling." Eleanor's gaze became as sharp as a razor's edge. "You will be escorted to the 40th floor. The board and our general counsel are waiting. Do not speak to anyone. Bring your personal effects." 2 other security guards, who had been summoned, stepped forward cautiously, flanking Cynthia and Richard. The 2 of them, so powerful just moments ago, now looked like prisoners being led to their execution. Eleanor turned her back on the chaos she had both created and perfectly controlled. She walked toward the private CEO elevator, the very one they had blocked her from. The polished bronze doors slid open, welcoming her. Before they closed, she paused for a second and looked back at the stunned crowd of employees. She said nothing more. She just looked. "Alex said everything. This is the new standard. You have all been warned." The elevator doors slid shut in absolute silence, leaving a massacre of careers and an unforgettable lesson in their wake. The air in the 40th floor boardroom was colder than the rain outside. 12 board members sat along the length of the long mahogany table, their faces a mixture of anxiety, anger, and a tinge of shame. Opposite them, under the harsh glare of the recessed lighting, sat Cynthia Rowe and Richard Sterling. They looked small and pathetic, their expensive suits now appearing like costumes for the condemned. The door opened, and Eleanor Vance entered. She didn't sit down immediately. She stood at the head of the table, the seat of ultimate power, and the silence in the room deepened. She placed her tablet on the table. The screen displayed the Sterling Vance stock price, still bleeding red. "Before we begin," Eleanor said, her voice no longer the cold steel of the lobby, but the heavy tone of a leader confronting a systemic failure. "Let's be clear. The issue here is not a thoughtless receptionist or a few prejudiced executives. The issue is how a culture that allows this to exist and to fester was built inside a tower that bears our names." She looked directly at Richard Sterling, whose father had co-founded the company with her own. "The question is not what should we do with them. The question is, how do we fail to protect our own core values?" No one dared to answer. Eleanor did not call for a vote. She did not seek consensus. She delivered her judgment, like a monarch reforming a kingdom. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "you will be stripped of all executive titles and responsibilities. Your position as VP of Operations will be filled. However, I am not firing you. You will be reassigned as a senior advisor on a new project, a project you will lead. It will be called the Dignity Initiative. You will spend the next year traveling to every one of our global offices, not to command, but to listen. You will document our failures in creating a truly inclusive environment. You can accept this assignment, or you can leave this company today with a letter of resignation. The choice is yours. Richard Sterling, for the first time in his life, bowed his head. I accept. Ms. Rowe, Eleanor turned. You will not be demoted. On the contrary, you are being promoted. You will be the new head of a newly created department, the Office of Corporate Culture and Ethics. You will report directly to me. Your first task, to design and implement mandatory unconscious bias training for all 5,000 employees, starting with this board. You have 90 days. You will be forced to confront the very prejudice you displayed today and turn it into a tool for change. Cynthia Rowe looked up, and in her eyes was astonishment, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of hope. I will. Then, Eleanor announced what would forever be known as the Vance Mandate. She spoke not just of training, but of structural change. An anonymous reporting system, managed by an independent third party, would be implemented within 30 days. Performance reviews for every manager would now include a metric for inclusive culture building. And most significantly, she announced the formation of a $50 million Sterling Vance Scholarship Fund, dedicated exclusively to funding talented students from underrepresented communities in finance. As the meeting drew to a close, she rose and walked to the vast window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. My father and yours, Richard, built this company on a single principle: trust. We sell trust for a living. Today, we shattered that trust within our own walls. We will rebuild it, brick by brick, starting with the dignity of every single person who walks through that door. She turned back, looking at every person in the room. This work is not optional. It is the new price of admission to work at Sterling Vance. This meeting is adjourned. The final scene is not one of celebration or a happy epilogue. The final scene is Eleanor Vance, standing alone in her office after everyone is gone. She looks down through the large glass window at the lobby, where the cleaning crew is wiping away the last traces of the chaos, sweeping up the final shards of a broken phone. The rain outside has stopped, but she knows the real cleanup, the one on the inside, has only just begun. There is no smile of victory. There is only the face of a leader who understands the full weight of the legacy she has just created and the long, difficult road ahead. A revolution had begun, not with a gunshot, but with a choice made in a cold lobby on a rainy afternoon. The most powerful response to discrimination isn't revenge. It's a revolution of respect. The story of Eleanor Vance isn't just a story about corporate America. It's a story about human dignity. It's about the moment of choice every single one of us faces when we witness an injustice, big or small. What do? Do we look away? Do we join the crowd? Or do we stand up and demand better? Every workplace, every school, every community has moments like these. Moments where bias shows its ugly face, where assumptions become actions, and where a person's worth is wrongly judged. The choice is always the same: punish or transform, exclude or include, tear down or build up. If this story moved you, if you believe that our workplaces should be spaces of dignity and respect for everyone, regardless of what they look like or where they come from, then let us know. Hit that like button to send a message that these stories matter. Share this video with someone who needs to see that our greatest power lies not in bringing others down, but in lifting them up. Your share could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to find their own strength. And most importantly, subscribe to Story Precious. We believe that every story holds a precious lesson, a gem of wisdom that can inspire change. By subscribing, you become part of a community dedicated to uncovering these powerful narratives of resilience, intelligence, and transformation. Leave a comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment like this? What would you have done? Your story matters, and your voice can create change.